Hey, what's up with it, guys? Hey, welcome back to another video. Now, this is going to be a little series. I don't know why we have this break time thing showing up, but a little series I'm going to do on various alts that I've been playing and leveling up, mostly all non-meta, very like off-meta specs that you're not seeing a lot because they're specs I'm interested in playing and learning about, and there's not a lot of content out there for them. So I am leveling these alts up, learning how to play them, mostly in like a PvP perspective, more just kind of like for fun, casual stuff. So if you are interested in checking out the Fury Warrior, that's what I'm going to be going over in this video, as you can tell by the title. Now, we are playing single-minded Fury, so we're using two one-handed weapons. This is going to be basically the same, everything I'm saying. If you want to play Titan's Grip, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just kind of a playstyle preference. It seems like Titan's Grip feels a little bit slower. I did play it a little bit while I was leveling, and I just liked how fast the two one-handers felt. It just felt like a very fluid playstyle. So that's kind of why I gravitated to that and just kind of wanting to try it out because you don't see it very often. So I'm going to go over kind of the talents and the general gameplay, kind of what you're trying to do from a PvP perspective, because it took me a little while to kind of figure all of this out, and there wasn't a ton of information on it. So I'm going to go over the basic kind of rotation and how Fury works in general, and then we'll go over the talents because you kind of need to understand the basics of the rotation to really understand the value of some of the talents. Now, Fury, your mastery is going to base off of your Enrage. Now, what's going to happen is your Bloodthirst has a chance to proc it, as well as Rampage, and it will give you an Enrage buff. You see here on my weak aura showing up for 4 seconds. This buff is giving us just a ton of offensive stats. You can see here it's reducing my damage taken, it's increasing my movement speed, it's increasing my haste, and it's increasing my damage done. Name of the game is trying to keep uptime on your Enrage as much as possible. Now, the damage increase from Enrage is going to scale, like I said, off of your mastery. All the other stuff are various talents and things like that. So what we want to be trying to do is utilizing our Bloodthirst when we're not enraged and we don't have enough rage for Rampage. There's a lot of ages in all of this, saying all of this out. But you basically, every time you get your rage all the way up, you're going to dump that rage into Rampage, which is going to give you a guaranteed enrage proc. Outside of those windows, you're going to be using Bloodthirst to try and trigger your Enrage. It has a 30% chance, if you're not talented, to trigger Enrage. Those are the two ways that you're going to be able to reliably trigger the Enrage. Things like Berserker Rage and stuff like that will not trigger it, so just keep that in mind. So let's get into the talents real quick, but TLDR, Rampage is your big rage dump, and this is going to guarantee trigger Enrage, and Bloodthirst has a 30% chance to trigger Enrage. Raging Blows, Condemn, or Execute, depending on what your covenant is, and Bloodthirst are all going to generate rage. So in the talents, I have been running Sudden Death in this top row, but Fresh Meat is also an option as well. If you are Venthyr, I would suggest Sudden Death because Condemn is just so strong, giving us kind of a damage mitigating component, and it's dealing shadow damage rather than physical damage. So it's very, very good all the time. The damage isn't mitigated against like these, like, you know, tanky specs, rep pallies, warriors, things like that, with armor like Execute is. If you're not playing Venthyr, Fresh Meat's a very good option as well. I actually really like the play style of Fresh Meat because it's giving you a guaranteed enrage proc on your initial Bloodthirst, which is really good for just kind of the fluidity in PvP. And it increases the chance from 30% to 45% chance of triggering enrage, you know, subsequently after that. So this is a very, very nice talent for consistency. Maybe if you're playing Kyrian, I would say this is a little bit more of an option because I think Sudden Death is very good if you're Venthyr and have Condemn. But I don't like the RNG aspect of this where it's just kind of like random procs. I'm never really a big fan of that, but these are really the only two options in my opinion. On the 25 row, we have Double Time and Stormbolt are the only really two viable options. Double Time is going to give you more mobility. Stormbolt is going to give you more CC. So depending on what you're doing and your, you know, playstyle preference, that's really the two options there, mobility or CC, and you get a pick. On the 30 row, Massacre is the best option. Frenzy's not good because you're swapping targets a bunch. Onslaught could be good. This actually does hit pretty hard. If you see the tooltip here for me, hits for 3,100 damage. For example, our Rampage hits for like 4K. Condemn hits around 3,500 damage. So you can see it's kind of in a similar ballpark as our big hitters. Not quite as much, but similar. It looks like it does hit harder than Raging Blow, but it doesn't scale with Cruelty. So I don't know how viable this would be. For me personally, I don't really like adding keybinds if I'm not gaining really substantive value from the actual keybind. So for that reason, I think Massacre is better just for consistency. Also, reducing the cooldown of your Execute or your Condemn is really massive because you want to be basically condemning as much as you can. On the 35 row, really we have two options again, War Paint or Bounding Stride. Bounding Stride is great mobility, especially paired with some honor talents we'll talk about in a second. But War Paint's basically a 10% damage reduction virtually all the time because your in-range uptime is pretty high. So I really recommend running War Paint if you can get comfortable with it and aren't dependent on the mobility from Bounding Stride. 40 row, Cruelty is the only real option here. In my opinion, these other two are just not at all on the same value level as Cruelty. This gives you a lot of burst following up on your Condemn and Rampage via Raging Blows. This is going to make your Raging Blow do more damage when you're enraged and have a higher chance of resetting its cooldown, potentially allowing you to get like 3 or 4 Raging Blows in a row, which will lead right back into another Rampage. So this is a very, very strong talent. 45 row, I run Bladestorm 100% of the time. If you wanted to, you could run Dragon Roar, but Bladestorm I think is a better option here in PvP because of removing snares. I also am running the legendary, the Signet of the Tormented Kings, and that also has a lot of synergy with Bladestorm. So for me, I don't really have a choice here, but if you don't like Bladestorm, you definitely could run Dragon Roar, but I think Bladestorm is better in PvP for most situations. In the 50 row, all of these are actually viable options. Like I said, since I'm running Signet, I think Anger Management is the go-to here because you have Recklessness on about a 1 minute cooldown, and then you have Bladestorm also on a 1 minute cooldown. And so depending on how you are with alternating these or combining them, it gives you a lot of options. Being able to basically Recklessness and then have a chance for either an additional Bladestorm or Avatar every 1 minute with Anger Management instead of a minute and a half feels pretty significant. Reckless Abandon, I've also seen people run. This can be good if you are a big fan of it, and Siegebreaker is also very good if you want to play that like maybe with the Siegebreaker legendary as well. It has some synergy there, but this is kind of my go-to build. If I'm doing more BG situations, it's also pretty common that I'll run like Double Time and Bounding Stride. This makes you incredibly mobile and very, very hard for people to peel off of you or like peel you off. But Stormboat's definitely an option. Like I said, I need to try and get better at using this because this is so strong. But if you are doing just kind of casual BGs or kind of just open world stuff or whatever it may be, running Bounding Stride and Double Time feels very good because you can just bounce all over the place and your uptime is very, very high. Now let's talk about the PvP talents here. Death Sentence, Battle Trance, and Enduring Rage are the three that are kind of my cookie cutter go-tos. Death Sentence, if you are Venthyr, basically with Condemn, being able to use that above 80% gives you kind of like a pseudo charge that you can use instead of wasting your charge to initiate on a fight. Say you're mounted up and running at a target, right? You can run in enough range to be able to Condemn right in the opener and basically save your charge for if they use some kind of escape. A lot of people don't seem to be running this with like the high rated Fury Warriors that I had looked up, and I'm not exactly sure why, but I have had a lot of fun playing with this, and there are a lot of times where you have kill potential on targets, especially with Massacre, and targets are low and you don't have any more mobility up, and Death Sentence is the difference of you getting that kill or not, being able to kind of close the gap and, you know, Condemn into Rampage and kill a target. So I'm a huge fan of Death Sentence from just how it feels from a playstyle perspective. I really like it. But this is the one I would say you can sub out potentially the most of these other options. Now, Battle Trance is going to give you a buff that's going to last for 18 seconds every time you cast 2 consecutive Raging Blows on a single target. If you cast Raging Blow on a separate target, you will drop the buff. It will go away. So it's important to realize this kind of makes you kind of like tunnel vision on a kill target potentially, which is kind of what you're doing most of the time anyway. But this is going to generate 3% of your health every 3 seconds as well as 5 rage. The rage is big, but the main thing is honestly is the health gen that you get from this is very, very, very high. 3% is a lot. This is going to scale as we get more and more gear. And if you look at your healing done over the course of a game, battle trance is actually a big chunk of it most of the time, or a BG, things like that. So being mindful of this, trying to keep it up as much as possible, is pretty noticeable for your just overall survivability. Now, Enduring Rage is going to make our in-rage last longer, so it's going to be a 5-second buff, I believe. Instead, is it 5 second? It might be 5 second default, but it's going to be a 5-second buff instead of a 4-second buff. Yeah, so here it's a 4-second buff, so it's going to be a 5-second buff. That doesn't seem like it would be massive, but it actually is, especially if you're running Warpaint, for example. Increasing the uptime on your in-rage, assuming you're not just overlapping it a bunch, increasing the uptime by 20-25% is pretty high. That's a lot of survivability paired with things like Warpaint. The other part of the Enduring Rage Honor talent is that your raging blows will extend your enrage by 1.5 seconds. So if we think about how this is going to play out from an actual practical gameplay perspective, you're going to be casting Rampage, which is going to guaranteed trigger Enrage. Then you're going to be following up with 2 Raging Blows, which is going to trigger your Battle Trance and also increase your Enrage by 3 seconds, right? Because it's 1.5 seconds per Raging Blow that you cast. So these two synergize amazing with each other. It's going to give you a really high uptime on Enrage where you basically don't have to rely on Bloodthirst at all to trigger Enrage. And as long as you're, casting Raging Blow, following your Rampage, you can basically bridge the gap and have Enrage up the entire time until you cast Rampage again. So these two paired together are very, very good for our overall damage output. If you're running Warpaint, this is basically allowing you to keep more or less 100% uptime on your 10% damage reduction, paired with a bunch of versatility. Obviously, it's just very strong all around. That's why I say these two are kind of default in my opinion. They're just so strong together, and just with the way that Fury works. I think these, if I don't run either of these, it's really noticeable. A couple honorable mentions here. Barbarian is really nice for mobility, especially if you pair it with Bounding Stride. This is going to give us a chance to basically cast Heroic Leap again in a 3-second window after we cast it. So it lets you jump to someone, maybe Stormbolt, and then jump back to the kill target, things like that. This is definitely an option. And I would say if you're going to run if you're looking for mobility but don't want to run Death Sentence, this is another good option, right? So rather than having a charge baked into our execute, you have like 2 charges of your Heroic Leap. So Barbarian's a fun option here as well. This can be fun paired, like I said, with Bounding Stride, and there's also the Heroic Leap legendary. If you want to be leapfrogging all over various maps, that is an option for you as well. Blood Rage is pretty decent. The main thing here is that it removes roots and snares. You'll see the tooltip here says gain 400 rage over 4 seconds. This is actually wrong. It's 40 rage over 4 seconds. The tooltip has an extra 0 added into it. The first time when I read this, I'm thinking 400 rage over 4 seconds means you're going to be able to cast this and cast Rampage 4 times in a row, which sounds insane from a burst perspective, but it's not 400. It's 40 rage. So this is nice, but mostly for a removing of snares more so than the actual rage generation. So just keep that in mind. This tooltip is incorrect. Death Wish can be really nice in BGs if you're just kind of having fun and you have like a heal bot, because when you get this stacked up, you do a ton of damage, but you're also very squishy because you're taking, assuming you have 10 stacks of it, you're going to be taking 50% increased damage. But this is kind of a fun PvP, like casual, like battleground type stuff. Sometimes I'll run this instead of Death Sentence. Mastering Commander is a very good option as well. We can run a Conduit that also reduces the cooldown and increases the duration of our rallying cry. So when you run this, you have a 1-minute rallying cry, and I think with the Conduit it gives like a 46% bonus health. It's pretty insane. It's a very, very strong team cooldown. I could see this being something like if I was doing RBGs, this being very, very strong. I'm not sure, honestly, if ARMS has access to this because I haven't actually tried ARMS at all. But this is a very strong team cooldown. If you run this, being a 1-minute cooldown is pretty insane for how potent this is, especially, like I said, if you're running the Conduit paired up with this. Disarm, everyone knows Disarm. I don't need to talk about this, but if you want to run that, by all means, go ahead. Slaughterhouse is another option. I don't find Bloodthirst being a big chunk of my damage, so I don't value this one too much, but this actually has really strong defensive capabilities. Reason being is what this does is it increases the damage done by your bloodthirst by up to 50% if the target is under 50% health. The last sentence or last portion of this tooltip though says reduces the remaining cooldown by 1 second. So what ends up happening is if you are running Slaughterhouse, which I'll talk about our defensives here in a second, you can actually fit one more bloodthirst in your enraged regen window, which actually can be a lot of survivability for yourself. However, it's just a little bit, it's a lot to invest the whole honor point in that just for that one time of survivability. And I don't find getting a lot of damage from bloodthirst, but again, I could be wrong on that. But the main value I find from Slaughterhouse is being able to fit in 3 bloodthirsts in your enraged regen window rather than 2 bloodthirsts. And that's kind of the big value for this one if you want to kind of play with that playstyle. Demolition is okay. This one I know Arms does have. It's whatever. I'm not that excited about it. Overwatch, same thing. It's whatever. You get a Spell Reflect with your Intervene if you want to play that defensive playstyle as well. So let's go through the gearing that I have here. Like I had mentioned, we have the legendary Signet of the Tormented Kings. This is very, very strong, giving our Recklessness and our Bladestorm a chance to also proc Recklessness, Bladestorm, or Avatar. When this is actually insane is if you pop Recklessness and you get lucky and you get an Avatar proc, you're like God mode for that 8 seconds or whatever that window of time is. So if you have that, then paired that with Condemn, Raging Blow, Rampage, Condemn, like that whole combo, you just do an absolute ton of damage. It's also important to be aware that you can get Bladestorm. So like right there, I just casted Recklessness and I got Bladestorm as my proc. Right, so I can effectively have 2 separate Bladestorms. Someone thinks I just casted my Bladestorm, they try and Frost Nova me, I can Bladestorm again and get out of it. So having the ability to cast 2 subsequent Bladestorms independent of each other is really, really nice for getting yourself out of CC. This happens a lot, actually. People see me cast Bladestorm and they think I don't have any way of getting out of like a Frost Nova or a Root, and then I cast it again. I've also casted Recklessness, hoping for the Bladestorm proc to get out of a Root, and it's worked. Obviously, that's a little bit riskier of a play and not something that I necessarily advise all the time, but just keep that in mind. You have basically a 50-50 chance of it being Avatar or Bladestorm, so depending on the situation, you might want to roll the dice on that one. But this is really, really fun from a playstyle perspective, so I definitely recommend trying to get this legendary if you're wanting to play this playstyle because it's a lot of fun. The other thing I want to mention here is the on-use trinket, the 1 minute cooldown, paired with our anger management. Basically, you can macro this in with your Recklessness, and you have very potent burst windows whenever you have Recklessness up. Recklessness is generally just over 1 minute, so you'll have a few seconds that you'll have to hold this potentially, but that's not that much of a problem. Now, from a secondary stats perspective, what you want to be trying to gear for, obviously versatility in PvP is amazing. Haste is very, very good, and our mastery is also very, very good. Mastery basically like an amplified versatility, but no damage mitigation. But mastery is very strong, and because we have a really high uptime on our enrage in general, this is just a very, very big damage bonus. Haste, a lot of our abilities are going to scale off of haste, things like bloodthirst. What else? I think raging blows, recharge is also scales off of haste, and same with condemn. So haste is generally the go-to that you're trying to get all the time. I'm personally trying to stack haste verse as much as I can, and if that's not an option, I'm trying to get mastery verse. That's kind of what I'm doing from a gearing perspective. Now, covenants, soul binds, all of that fun stuff. I can't tell you too much because you see this is an alt and I don't have a lot of these things unlocked. Oh, nice. We can unlock these. Hell yeah. But I will tell you a couple that are very strong. Recklessness, this is called Depths of Insanity. This potency conduit, very, very strong because we cast Recklessness a lot. And if we're running anger management and we have this up a bunch, it's just very, very strong. Makes like a 16-second burst window instead of 12 seconds or something like that. Harrowing Punishment is the condemned specific one. This one's okay, but I don't think this is super valuable by comparison to like this increased damage from Recklessness. Like you can see here, I don't have a lot of the other ones unlocked, so I can't really speak too much on Conduits. I think this Stalwart Guardian reducing the cooldown of enraged regen is very, very strong because that's our main defensive that we have. Another one that's pretty decent is this Brutal Vitality, where we translate a percentage of our damage done into our Ignore Pain, which Ignore Pain is kind of our constant survivability stuff. And then the Finesse Conduits, we have this one that I was talking about, Inspiring Presence, increasing the duration and health granted of your Rallying Cry by 20%. Like I said, pairing this with the Honor Talent, Master and Commander is very, very, very good. And I think I'll have to see what other conduits I have. These ones that I've been running seem fine, and I've been just kind of, like I said, this is a more casual alt that we've been just trying to gear up and unlock everything. But those are the few that I think are pretty significant from a conduit perspective. Harrowing Punishment is okay, but I think this is, it's kind of like hit or miss, because if you don't have multiple people around the target you're killing, you don't get a lot of value from this. And I think this you're going to always get value from in your big burst windows, not to mention you're just proccing Recklessness a bunch if you're using this legendary as well. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here is defensives, because this is really the most important part. To me, it seemed like once I kind of got a better feel for the defensive capabilities, it seemed like night and day versus how Fury felt. So, like we've talked about, you have your Rallying Cry. It was just a generic kind of health increase, no damage mitigation itself. We also have Ignore Pain. Now, Ignore Pain is on a 12-second cooldown and does take a lot of rage. So you're going to basically be substituting the damage from your Rampage with the defensive components of your Ignore Pain. However, if you're getting focused, you basically always want to be casting Ignore Pain instead of Rampage to just try and survive, because it is really efficient when it comes to actual damage mitigation itself. So if you're being focused, cast Ignore Pain on cooldown as much as you can. Be aware of it. You're going to be doing less damage because you can't cast Rampage, but you're going to be gaining a ton of survivability. Now, we also have Enraged Regeneration. This is our big defensive shield wall type thing. So this is going to reduce the incoming damage we take by 30%, and it's also going to significantly increase the amount of healing we receive from Bloodthirst. So let me show you here. The Bloodthirst component of this is not something that I was super familiar with prior to kind of messing with this, but if you see, our Bloodthirst is healing around 900, 936. So if I pop Enraged Regen and then I Bloodthirst, it's going to heal me for 7,000 right there, right? And we do it again, 7,000 again. Like I said, if you have Slaughterhouse and your Bloodthirst is reduced by that 1 second, it would allow you to get a third Bloodthirst in that window. So effectively healing yourself for 20, 25k, while also simultaneously reducing the incoming damage you take by 30%. So Enraged Regen is a very, very good cooldown, but just be aware, a lot of the value from this, you also want to have uptime on the target so that you can cast a couple Bloodthirst during that time as well. You don't necessarily always want to cast it if you're at full health. You want to make sure that you're casting it where you can also benefit from the increased healing of your Bloodthirst as well. The healing from Bloodthirst is percentage based, so it does pair well with things like Rallying Cry or Fortitude or whatever other kind of health increases you can get. But yeah, just be aware that you want to basically be casting Ignore Pain on cooldown if you're being focused, and you want to make sure that you're able to benefit and cast 2 Bloodthirsts during your Enraged Regen window at least to gain that extra healing. Regarding the other conduits, or sorry, the other covenants and soulbinds and things like that, you can see here we're Venthyr. I'm running Nausea, but like I said, it's not really for any specific reason. This haste buff is very good. However, it's very like random when it actually ends up proccing. You can't really, you know, preemptively play around it all that much. So it's okay. It's nice when it does line up well. I know Kyrian is also very strong paired with the, you know, like the spear thing you throw down and like blade storming on top of your spear. So those are the two that I think just in general and with warriors are very, very strong. But I have been a big fan of playing Venthyr, and having Condemn with this playstyle seems just like to fit perfectly, and I'm just a huge fan of it so far. It's been a lot of fun. So let me know if you guys have any questions, if you guys want to see more videos like this. Sorry to make this so long, but I feel like these are all things I've kind of learned over playing this for the last week. And if you guys are interested in playing Fury Warrior as well, or this is a spec that seems enticing to you, hopefully this answered some questions and gave you a better idea of kind of how to play it and what you should be trying to do if you're starting out and running some casual BGs and things like that. So like I said, let me know if you have questions down below. Thanks so much for hanging out, guys. I do appreciate it, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.